Hello everyone! Starting with this video, I want to create a new playlist on the channel that will be about pure JavaScript. Why am I doing this and what is my goal? Because there are plenty of JavaScript tutorials on YouTube and you can easily find them. But usually all these playlists and lessons cover only the very basics of the language. That is, they talk about loops, conditional operators working with the DOM and so on. But indeed, few people talk about the so-called complex elements in JavaScript. And that's why in this playlist, I won't be covering the basics, but I will be discussing its complex elements with simple examples, where I will explain what it means, how it works, and how you can interact with it. So if you find this video useful and learn something new, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and support this video. You can also add me as a friend on vKontakte. Well, let's get started and we'll begin with a very serious topic. Prototypes, what it is, why it's needed, and how it works inside JavaScript. Let's look at this with a simple example. Right now, I have a very simple application. There's an index.html file that just includes the script, and there's an index.js file that's currently empty. On the left, accordingly, I'm just displaying this index.html in the browser. Now let's create an object and play around with it a bit. Let's say, using the keyword const, I'll create a new object and call it person. Objects in JavaScript are created using curly braces. Let's assume that this person would have several fields. For example, a field name with the value maxim. Let's say it has a field age, for example, 25. And I'll also add some function here because we can also create functions inside objects. For example, I'll name the function grid. It will be a function, and all it will do is print the message grid to the console. Okay, we get some object, and if we refresh the page in the browser and then go to the console, if I type person here, we will see the fields that we displayed. So we have a certain object and we can access specific fields that it contains. So for example, we can get his name through the main field and we get maxim. Next, we can output the age and we get 25. And if we, for example, call the function grid, since it's a function, I call it, then in the console, we will get the corresponding result grid. So basically, there's nothing unusual here. Now, let's say I clear the console and try to do something completely strange. For example, I will also refer to our person object and output the value of its function. For instance, say hello. Here, I'll press enter and we'll get an error because the person object doesn't have a function called say hello, since we haven't defined it. And basically, this makes sense. But here's the catch. If I also refer to this person and let's say, for example, call a method on it called toString. So as you can see, we don't get any error. And in the console, we get the message object, which is essentially a string. And you might ask me why we get an error for the say hello function. And it's quite logical because we haven't defined it. But when we call the toString method, we get some value and no error. Actually, it's very simple. That's how prototypes work. And considering that the object doesn't have a say hello function, we got an error. But the prototype has an additional function to string. And we got some value. It's not clear yet, but let's write the following person and I'll just press enter. Now in the console, we can expand this object and see the fields that we have defined. But in addition to these fields that we have in our script, the browser also shows us some properties. 2_proto. This is a special property that is a reference to the object's prototype. And here we can see the name object. This is the name of a certain parent class, so to speak, which acts as a parent for this object. If we expand this property, we will see a large number of additional methods. And if we look closely, we will see a method called the toString. So when we called the toString method, we first looked at the top level of this object. If we didn't find it there, we went to the prototype and found the toString method there. How does this work? And why do we interact with prototypes at all? Let's rewrite our application a bit differently. Besides the fact that we can create objects using curly braces, which is actually just a shorthand for simplifying object creation, we can rewrite the creation of the person object a bit differently. We can also write a person equals new object in the code, a JavaScript statement. And in the constructor of this object, we can pass the properties that we defined earlier. And I will comment out this person, or rather delete it entirely. So now we can more clearly see how the object is created. That is, the variable person is actually an instance of the object class. If we refresh the page in the browser and type person here, essentially we will see the same result. That is, we get the same fields, and we also get some properties of the prototype. Essentially, in JavaScript, anything that is created is actually an object. And a bit later in the lesson we will talk about this, and this case is no exception. That is, we see how we create a person variable from the object class, and therefore when we pass some parameters here, in addition to these parameters, the prototype of the main class in JavaScript, which is the object, also gets into the object, and it carries other fields that we can use. That is, in fact, the prototype is the same object, but it is present in some parent entities. Now, what can we do with this? Suppose we can refer to the global object class. Then we can access its structure, which is called the prototype one. In this prototype, we can create any new fields. For example, I can create a function, say hello here. This will be a function where, let's say, we will output a message hello in the console. So now pay attention to what I have written. We create a person object as before, and it does not have this say hello function. Next, we refer to the prototype of the class from which we are creating this object and assign it a new function. And now, if we type person in the console and then try to call the say hello method, as you can see, Chrome already suggests that such a method exists. And if I press enter, we get the expected result. In other words, thanks to this construction, we extended the base prototype of the object class and added a new method to it. As a result, it became available for the object we create. And in fact, this is how prototypes work. That is, it is a specific object that is present in parent elements, and with its help, we can inherit from different objects and have access to more advanced functions. Now, for example, let's consider another point. Suppose I create a new variable, which I will name Lina, and then I can refer to the global object class, which has a method called create, through which we create new objects, and then in the create method, we can pass an object that will actually serve as the prototype for the Lina object. For example, I can specify the person object as the prototype here, because a prototype is an object, and the variable person is also an object. Now, if I save everything and look in the web browser, type Lena, we will see that it is an empty object. But let's say now if I type lena.grid, then we will get a certain result. If I write Lena here, for example, toString, then we will also get some result. But the Lena object is actually empty. However, if we expand it, we won't see anything at the top level, but it has a prototype. If we expand it, at the first level, we will see the prototype of the object from which we created it, which in our case is the person object. And further, we have an even lower prototype that has the function say hello, or, for example, the function toString, which we called. And essentially, what can we do now? We can do anything with the Lena object. For example, we can type Lena name and get the field Maxime here. Again, when we inspect the Lena object, it has no fields at the top level. But if we inspect the prototype, it has a name field that equals Maxime. Let's assume that it is illogical and the object Lena should have its own name. What can we do? We can write lena.name equals Elena. Or as an example, if I refresh the page and then type Lena, we will see that there is now a name field at the top level. If I type lena.name, we will get the value Elena here. If I expand this object, we will see that the prototype also has a name field. And how does the prototype work? It goes from top to bottom. That is, if it finds a field or a function at the top level, it calls it immediately. But if it doesn't find anything, it then refers to the prototype and tries to find something in it. If there is nothing in this prototype either, it continues down the prototype chain and finds the method it needs to call. That is, for example, this is how we use the toString function. But if it doesn't find anything in the prototype, it then throws an error. Yes, that is, it is easy to prove that we can call the method say hello on the Lena object. And as you can see, we get some result. Although we actually know that the sayHello function is in the prototype of this object, and that's really all there is to prototypes. In other words, once again, it's a specific object that is present in objects, and it is called in a top-down chain. That is, if we find some fields or a function at the top level, we refer to them. If we don't find them, we go down the prototype and look for either fields or a function. Now, what I mentioned at the beginning of the video about how in JavaScript everything is actually objects, how does this work? Let's say I can create a variable str, which will be an empty string, for example, imstring. Yes, and if we, for example, look in the browser at what str is, we will get the expected result, which is a regular string. But now, if we refer to this str and press the dot, we will see what principles, methods, and fields this object actually has. For example, the dot length. We get the length of this string. Let's say we can call some other method, for example, bolt, and we will get our string wrapped in a b tag. But how can we find out what fields are available in a given object or a given string? For this, we just need to slightly rewrite the initialization of this line, because it is actually a kind of shortcut as well. And what happens behind the scenes looks something like this. We create a string through the global class newString, and here we get the string. Now, if we refresh the page and type str, we will see in the console that it says string here, because it is some kind of parent class. And further in the curly braces, that is, in the object, the value of this string is specified. If we expand this specific object, we will see the length field that we called, and further, this string also has a proto-object. If we expand it, we will see the string's prototype, where we will find a large number of methods that we can call on the string, and as you know, many of these methods you call often and use them. However, if we expand proto further, we will again see sayHello, for example, which we created for the object, because in reality, the object class is the most important class in JavaScript, and everything stems from it. Thus, we have proven that a string is also an object, but it has another class, string, above the object class. Essentially, we can refer to the string and write sayHello. As you can see, we get the same result, but we are working with a string, and that's really all there is to it. There's nothing more to say about prototypes because, essentially, they are just objects that we use to extend the properties of other objects or classes, and with it, we can establish certain inheritance within JavaScript, which can sometimes be very convenient